tough and they're really rough and nothing's working, but there's something inside of you that says, I just have to follow that because you don't know who you're going to meet.
Welcome to the Binge on Self-Love podcast. My name is Anna, but you can call me Anci, and thank you so much for tuning in. Binge on Self-Love podcast is about navigating binge eating disorder struggles, disordered eating, and negative body image. Although I share my personal experience with having a negative body image, eating disorders, and I do uncover bits of my personal story, this podcast is not as much about me as it is about you. Beautiful human beings who struggle, who fight, who grow, and who evolve every single day. This podcast is for anyone who wants to feel supported on their recovery journey and simply for anyone who's trying to improve their relationship with themselves. I believe together we can turn something so negative, such as binge eating, into something more positive and hopefully go from binging on food and self-hatred to binging on self-love. Subscribe to the Binge on Self-Love podcast on your favorite platform and tune in every Tuesday for a new episode.
But there's something inside of you that says, I just have to follow that because you don't know who you're going to meet.
Disclaimer: Binge on Self-Love podcast is intended for informational purposes only. It doesn't provide professional medical advice and it is not a substitute for diagnosis or treatment. In this podcast, we cover the topic of eating disorders, so if you find this topic triggering, it may be better for you not to listen to this podcast. Always make sure to put your mental health first. Hello everyone, welcome to the Binge on Self-Love podcast. My name is Anna, but you can call me Anci, and welcome to another episode of the Binge on Self-Love. In today's episode, I want to share with you a few tips on how to get more self-love into your life. Those are tips and things that seems to work in my life, so I thought, why not to share them with you today? So without further ado, let's get into today's episode. My very first tip, and probably one of the most important ones, is to be appreciative and to celebrate every little step you take forward on your journey. Whether you took a step forward on your recovery journey, on being kinder to yourself and not treating yourself like shit, on putting yourself first, on changing something or learning something new, or anything else for that matter, that's something to be grateful and proud of. We often focus on the end goal, while there's so much we can appreciate and be proud of every single day. For example, when I started my binge eating disorder recovery journey a few years ago, I was so focused on staying binge-free in the long run that I completely overlooked that I already had so much to be proud of. Every single day when I said yes to the recovery and no to the eating disorder was an accomplishment in itself. This brings me to my next tip, which is to focus on the bright side of things. Now, if you knew me, the last thing you would call me is an optimist or someone who's always looking at things from the bright side. But it's definitely something I am very well aware of and something I try to work on. And during years and years of having a very negative and unhappy relationship with myself, I realized that unless you want to end up constantly unhappy, demotivated, and feeling depressed, you have to focus on the positive side of things. It's not always easy, but it can be the difference between you giving up and you not giving up. Like I've mentioned earlier, I was too focused on the end goal of my recovery, which for me was me living a life without an eating disorder, that I didn't pay any attention to all those days that I didn't binge. But whenever there was a day when I did binge, I immediately felt like a failure. I started to question my ability to ever recover from an eating disorder, and I felt really demotivated. But if you look at things from the positive perspective, or at least from a more realistic one, me binging was just one day out of many when I didn't binge, and that was an accomplishment in itself. And trust me, I know how hard it can be to see something good in a bad situation. And the last thing I would want you to do is to put on a fake, happy, and positive face. But in certain situations, I do believe it makes more sense to focus on what went well rather than on what didn't. My tip number 3 is still connected to celebrating your success and accomplishments. I think it's great to be proud and to celebrate any step forward that you took. However, one thing we should avoid at all costs is to compare our achievements with somebody else's. As we all know, comparison is the thief of joy, and if we compare our success to somebody else's, we are guaranteed to feel like our achievement means nothing and that we don't really have anything to be proud of, and that's definitely something you don't want to do. I'm someone who gets discouraged by other people's success and who starts to doubt her own achievements. It's definitely not a trait I'm proud of, but it is what it is. And I know that if I start comparing what I've accomplished, no matter how big or small, I'm always going to feel like it's not enough, like I am not enough. If you go online and start comparing yourself being binge-free for an entire week with somebody who's been binge-free for over 20 years, then you'll probably start to question your own achievement and whether that's something you should even be proud of. But the point is, it doesn't matter how big or small your achievement is compared to somebody else. What matters is what that achievement means to you. And trust me, every day when you say no to an eating disorder is an accomplishment in itself, and it's something you should definitely be proud of. So don't let anything or anyone, not even the perfectionist in you, belittle your accomplishments. My tip number 4 is to remind yourself that some time ago you wished you'd be exactly where you are now. One thing that I've noticed I do quite a lot, and I believe most of us do as well, is that right now, at this very moment, we wish and we hope and we plan what we want our life to be like in a year. Where we want to be, how we want to feel, what we want to do. And when the year will pass, you won't probably even notice that you're exactly where you wish to be because you're too focused on where you want to be the next year and the next year and so on. For example, last year around this time, I wished I would move to a big city, that I would live in an amazing apartment with my boyfriend, and that I would have a job in a certain company. And today, when I look at my life now, I live in a big city, I live in a pretty amazing apartment with my partner, and I do have a job in a company that I wished to work at. But if you would ask me, I wouldn't even notice that I am exactly where I wished to be some time ago. Once again, I am too focused on what's happening next that I didn't even take the time to appreciate where I'm at, and that I got where I wanted, and that I already have so much to be proud of. We often wish to achieve something, and then when we do, we're like, yeah, whatever, on to the next thing. I've experienced something similar a few months ago when I started binging again. I took all those years being binge-free for granted, that it wasn't really until I started experiencing binging episodes again that I realized, damn, I really got this far. I got to a point where I wanted to be and I didn't even appreciate it. So remind yourself where you're at, if this is where you wished to be some time ago, and if it is so much to be proud of. So that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I wanted to try something a little different and straight to the point, so definitely let me know on Instagram at Binge on Self-Love. What do you think, and if you prefer this concept of episodes? I'll be back next Tuesday with another episode. Until then, take care, practice self-love as much as you can, and talk to you soon. Bye!
Have to be your biggest fan. And when things are really tough and they're really rough and nothing's working, but there's something inside of you that says, I just have to follow that. Because you don't know who